Under the shadow of a tall tree deep in the bush, Princess Eliana sat trembling. Her hands clutched a tiny, crying newborn wrapped in a scarf. Just 16 years old, her world had turned upside down. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, my son. Please forgive me. I wish I could take you home, but I can't." Her heart felt like it was shattering with each cry of the infant. She wanted to keep him, to love him, raise him, protect him. But fear wrapped, tighter than any blanket. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "No daughter of mine will bring shame to this family. If you get pregnant before marriage, you are no longer my child." Eliana wiped her tears, but they kept falling. She had come prepared. She chose a spot no one would easily find. At her boarding school, far from the palace, no one knew she was expecting. For 9 months, she hid the pregnancy behind baggy clothes and polite smiles. She laughed with classmates, but every moment she lived in fear. Now the secret was out. "The baby was here. I love you," she said, placing the child on a soft bed of leaves, padded with her scarf. "But I have to go. It's the only way you can survive." Her hands trembled as she tucked the cloth around his tiny body, kissing his forehead again and again. A scream of pain swelled inside her, but she kept it buried. She was royalty, or at least she used to be. If her father, King Hadrian, found out she'd given birth, he would cast her out forever. Her mother, her brothers, everyone would turn away in shame. With legs shaking, Eliana stood up and took one last look at her son. His little hands reached into the air, unknowingly asking for her. Her chest ached, but she turned and ran, letting the night swallow her whole. Meanwhile, on a lonely road just outside the forest, an elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, were driving home from a late-night gathering. The road was silent, but suddenly their old car coughed and came to a halt. "What's wrong?" Mrs. Morgan asked, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't know," Mr. Morgan grunted, trying the ignition again. The engine only groaned. Just then Mrs. Morgan heard something. A faint cry. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "Hear what?" her husband asked. "A baby. Crying." Mr. Morgan dismissed it. "It's probably an animal. Stay in the car." But Mrs. Morgan knew better. She stepped out, heart pounding, and followed the sound through the dark bushes. There, under a tree, she found a newborn, wrapped in a scarf, crying softly. "Oh my God," she whispered, tears flooding her eyes. She picked up the baby and held him to her chest. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for this miracle. I name you Jonah," she said. "You are a gift." Mrs. Morgan stepped back toward the road, cradling the baby in her arms. Her heart raced, but it was no longer from fear. It was awe, something divine. Mr. Morgan stood beside the car, staring in disbelief as the infant came into view. "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You don't even know where that child came from. What if he's cursed?" Mrs. Morgan held Jonah tighter. "I don't care what you think," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "This child was left to die in the bush. But God brought me here to save him. I'm not leaving him." Mr. Morgan scoffed, shaking his head. "You've never even had a child, and now you want to take in a stranger's baby?" The words cut deep. For years they had prayed, wept, and waited for a child. But none had come. Still, Mrs. Morgan's grip did not loosen. "Child or not, I know what I heard. I know what I felt. This baby, he belongs with us." Frustrated, Mr. Morgan turned back to the car. "Fine, get in." He twisted the key, and miraculously, the engine roared to life. Both of them paused. Just moments ago, the car was dead. Now it purred like new. Mrs. Morgan looked down at Jonah, her eyes wide with wonder. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "It's a sign." He's our blessing." They drove home in silence, the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. But while her heart swelled with love, Mr. Morgan's thoughts remained clouded with suspicion. The next morning, sunlight poured into the modest house, but inside the air was heavy. Mrs. Morgan sat on the couch feeding little Jonah with a warm bottle of milk. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers, and every time he blinked, she felt as though God himself had placed the boy in her life. But Mr. Morgan wasn't smiling. He paced the room with folded arms, finally stopping in front of her. "We need to talk," he said. His tone was sharp. Mrs. Morgan looked up, her stomach nodding. "We have to take him to an orphanage." "Today," he said. "We don't know who he belongs to. We don't know if the police are looking. It's the safest choice." Mrs. Morgan clutched the baby tighter. "No," she said quietly. "I prayed for years. I cried for years. And now this child shows up? You think it's coincidence? No. This is how God answered us." Mr. Morgan's jaw clenched. "You're being emotional." "I'm being faithful," she replied, her eyes watering. "Have you even thought about how the car started the moment I picked him up? That's not normal. That's divine." He said nothing, only stared at the floor. "We asked God for a child," she whispered. "Maybe this was his way of giving us one." Mr. Morgan finally sat down, rubbing his temples. After a long silence, he looked up. "All right, Helena," he said softly. "We'll keep him." Tears ran down her cheeks as she whispered, "Thank you." But in his heart, Mr. Morgan wasn't fully convinced, and in a distant palace, storm, clouds of secrets and shame were gathering. Back at the Royal Academy, Princess Eliana sat in her room, sunlight streaming through the windows, but her heart was filled with shadows. Her phone buzzed on the table. It was her mother, Queen Mariana. Eliana wiped her face quickly and tried to steady her voice as she picked up the call. "Hello, Mama," she whispered. "My daughter." The Queen's voice was warm but firm. "You've been away too long. Your father and I are worried. We miss you." "I'm fine, Mama," Eliana replied quickly. "Really, I'm just focused on school. We're having a family gathering this weekend. Your father insists you attend. He says it's time." Eliana's stomach dropped. "A meeting? At the palace?" "Yes, Mama. I'll come," she said, forcing her voice to stay calm. But as soon as the call ended, Eliana dropped the phone and broke down. Her body shook with grief. "I didn't want to leave you," she cried, hugging herself. "Please forgive me, my baby." A knock on the door startled her. It was Dario, her secret boyfriend, and the father of the child she'd abandoned. Eliana stood up, fury exploding from her chest. "What are you doing here?" she screamed. "You made me do it! You left me alone!" Dario stepped back, his face pale with guilt. "I'm sorry. I know I failed you. And him. Let's go back to the bush. Maybe, just maybe, he's still there." "You think he's still alive?" she cried. "It's been 2 days. Wild animals must have—" Her voice broke. "He's gone, Dario, and it's your fault." She fell to her knees, sobbing. Dario dropped beside her, trying to hold her, but she shoved him away. "I hate you," she whispered. "I hate myself more," Dario replied, tears in his own eyes. The room filled with silence, pain, regret. 2. Young hearts shattered by one mistake. Eliana looked up, her face red and wet. "God, if you're listening, please protect my son. If he's alive, please keep him safe." The weekend came faster than she had hoped. Eliana packed her bag and entered the royal car with dread pressing down on her chest. As the golden gates of the palace opened, her soul trembled. She stepped out of the car and into her mother's arms. "Oh, my sweet girl," Queen Mariana said, holding her close. "You look so beautiful, but why are your breasts so full?" Eliana's heart skipped. She laughed nervously. Oh, Mama, I'm just growing. I'm becoming a woman. The queen squinted. You look pregnant. Eliana shook her head rapidly. Of course not. I don't even have a boyfriend. Queen Mariana nodded slowly, unconvinced. You better not be lying. If your father finds out, he'll destroy you. You know the rule. No romance before 18. Not even a handshake. Yes, Mama, I promise. The queen smiled faintly. Good. Girl, now go freshen up. There's no real meeting, I just missed you. Eliana's heart cracked again. Her mother had called her home out of love, and she had brought nothing but a lie. As they walked toward the palace doors, Eliana whispered a prayer in her heart. God, please forgive me. Help me fix this. Somehow, weeks passed, and life in the Morgan household slowly changed. At first, baby Jonah brought light and laughter. His giggles echoed through the small home, and Helena Morgan, who once longed for a child, felt joy she'd never known. She had become a mother, not by blood, but by love. But trouble was quietly seeping in. Arthur Morgan, once a steady man, lost his job when the company he'd served for 15 years shut down without warning. Bills began piling up, meals grew smaller, smiles faded. Helena tried to stay strong, comforting Arthur while still caring for Jonah. But he was changing. The once kind husband now sat in silence, or worse, returned home late at night smelling of cheap liquor and regret. One evening, Arthur kicked over a chair and yelled, Ever since that boy came into this house, everything's gone wrong. He's a curse. Helena turned sharply, holding Jonah close to her chest. Don't you dare call him that, she said, her voice shaking. He's a blessing. Arthur laughed bitterly. Where's your God now? We prayed for years for a child, and he sent us this. We're worse off than before. Helena's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't back down. God's time is the best time. He knows what he's doing. Arthur stormed toward her, pointing his finger in her face. Choose. It's either me or that boy. Helena stood up, clutching Jonah tighter. You're the one bringing curses into this home, not him, she shot back. Instead of rising after falling, you drowned yourself in alcohol. Arthur's face darkened with rage. Call me a drunk again, and I swear I may not have birthed this child, Helena interrupted, but I am a mother. You? You're a coward. His hand rose in anger, but she stared him down. Go ahead, hit me. Show the world how strong you are. He stopped, frozen, then slowly lowered his hand. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Helena collapsed to the floor, still cradling Jonah, who was now crying softly. She rocked him gently, tears falling on his tiny forehead. Don't worry, my son, she whispered. I'll never let anyone hurt you. You're not a curse. You're my reason to keep going. That night, as the wind howled outside and Arthur wandered the streets with his demons, Helena sat in the dark, broken but not beaten. In her heart, a promise was made. She would protect Jonah with everything she had, no matter what it cost her. Back at school, Princess Eliana's life was unraveling. The once brilliant scholar now struggled to pass even the simplest exams. Her teachers were confused. Eliana had always been among the best. But now every assignment felt like a burden, every classroom a prison. At night, she buried her face in her books, trying to force focus. But the words blurred. The guilt screamed louder than any textbook. Maybe it's punishment, she thought, bitterly. Maybe God is reminding me of what I did to my son. Her chest ached with a weight no one could see. One evening, after failing yet another important test, Eliana locked herself in her dorm room. She cried until her pillow was soaked, her hands clutching her stomach like she was still carrying the baby inside her. A soft knock broke the silence. She didn't answer. Then the door creaked open. It was Dario. Eliana's grief turned to fury in an instant. "You again?" she snapped, standing up with wild eyes. "How dare you show your face?" "I came to talk," Dario said quietly, stepping inside. "Please, just listen," she shoved him hard. "You ruined my life. You denied me. You denied your own son." "I was scared," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't know what to do, but I've changed. I want to make it right." Eliana's voice trembled with rage. "Right? You think we can fix this? My child is gone. I left him in the forest, alone." She broke into sobs, falling to the floor. Dario crouched beside her, helpless. "I've been having dreams," he whispered. "My mother, too. She saw a baby crying, in the dark. We went to a pastor, a man of God. He prayed and said, 'Our son is alive.'" Eliana looked up slowly. Her face was pale with shock. "Alive?" she whispered. "Yes," Dario said, gripping her hand. "He said God protected him, that he's still out there and he'll return to us." Eliana blinked, unable to speak. A flicker of hope pierced her chest. Her breath caught. "But I denied him," she murmured. "I left him. What kind of mother does that?" "A scared one," Dario said, eyes full of tears. "And I was a coward, but I believe God has forgiven us." Eliana turned away. She didn't know what to believe anymore. But deep inside her, something shifted. A thread of faith, fragile but alive, began to weave its way through her broken soul. "God," she whispered, "please, just give me one more chance." Far away in a quiet house where fate had taken her son, danger was already stirring, and time was running out. 2 years had passed. Princess Eliana was now 18, but the guilt had aged her far beyond her years. Every night she saw her son's face in her dreams, his tiny hands reaching for her, his cries echoing in the silence. She had everything a royal daughter could want, yet she felt empty. One evening, unable to carry the weight any longer, she walked into the palace throne room and fell to her knees before her father, King Hadrian. "Father," she sobbed, "I have sinned. Please forgive me. Let me speak." King Hadrian leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "What have you done, Eliana?" With trembling lips, she told him everything. How she had fallen in love with Dario, how she got pregnant at 16, how Dario had denied her, how she gave birth alone in the bush, and how, out of fear, she left her baby behind. When she finished, the silence was unbearable. Then came the roar. "You abandoned my grandson in the forest?" the king bellowed. His voice thundered off the marble walls. Eliana fell flat to the floor, her sobs uncontrollable. "I was scared, Papa. I didn't want to bring shame to our family. Please. I didn't know what else to do." King Hadrian paced the hall, his face filled with fury, but also heartbreak. His daughter, his pride, had lived with this torment in silence. After a long pause, his voice dropped to a whisper. "You were foolish, but you are still my daughter." Eliana lifted her head, eyes wide with hope. "We must find him," the king said firmly. "Wherever he is." He immediately summoned High Priest Malak, a spiritual leader known for his wisdom and visions. "Tell me," the king demanded, "is my grandson still alive?" High Priest Malak closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and after a moment said, "Yes, Your Majesty, he lives, but he is not safe. He is loved by one, but threatened by another." "What must we do?" King Hadrian asked, his voice urgent. "Tell the truth to the nation," the priest replied. "Announce the search. Offer a reward. Let the people help bring the boy home." The king nodded. "Prepare the royal message. Offer 50 million naira. We must find him now." That very night, every TV and radio station in the kingdom echoed the same headline. Royal family seeks abandoned child 2 years ago. Jaggedy Bush area. Reward N50,000. The news spread like wildfire, and in a small market far from the palace, Helena Morgan, the woman who had raised the boy as her own, stood frozen as she overheard two women gossiping. "If only I had found that baby," one woman sighed. 50 million, I'd be rich. Helena dropped her basket. Her mind raced. Could it be Jonah? She rushed out of the market, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to tell the palace. She had to do the right thing. But as she burst through her front door to share the news with her husband, Arthur Morgan had other plans, and they were deadly. Helena Morgan burst through the front door, her breath ragged from running, her heart pounding like a drum. Inside their modest home, Arthur sat lazily on the old couch, a half-empty bottle in hand. On the floor, little Jonah played quietly, unaware of the storm about to break. "Arthur!" Helena cried, dropping the market bag. "Have you heard the news?" Arthur glanced up with annoyance. "Why are you yelling like a madwoman?" She stepped forward, eyes wide with urgency. "The royal family. They're looking for a baby abandoned in the bush 2 years ago. They've announced a reward, 50 million naira. Arthur, I think Jonah is that child." The moment she said it, Arthur's expression changed. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightened. He stood slowly. "We're not telling anyone," he said coldly. Helena gasped. "What? But he's not our child. He belongs to them." "He's mine now," Arthur growled. "You've never given me a child, not even once. I don't care who he was born to. He stays here." "You called him cursed," she reminded him. "You blamed him for everything." Arthur's face twisted. "That was before I knew he was worth 50 million. Helena stared at him in horror. "So that's it? You don't care about Jonah. You care about money." "I care about keeping what's mine," he barked. "If you try to return him, I swear—" "I will," she said, trembling but firm. "I'll call the palace tomorrow. They deserve to know their son is alive." Arthur's face darkened into something dangerous. That night, while Helena prepared dinner, Arthur stood silently in the kitchen doorway, watching her with eyes full of rage and calculation. If she tells them, I lose everything, he thought. An idea crept into his mind, one he had once buried. From a high cupboard, he retrieved a tiny bottle of old powder, something a drunken friend had once given him as a joke. He poured it into her food carefully. At the table, Helena ate without suspecting anything. Exhausted from the day's events, she yawned and rubbed her eyes. "I'm so tired," Arthur feigned concern. "Go lie down, my dear. You've done enough today." She kissed Jonah good night and disappeared into the bedroom. Hours passed. Arthur waited. Then he crept into the room. Helena was lying very still. No movement, no breath. His heart pounded. It worked. But just as he started to plan his next move, there was a loud knock at the door. "Who's that now?" he muttered. A voice called out, "Wilson, it's Mama Ruth. I need to borrow salt." Arthur's eyes widened. Not her, the nosiest neighbor on the street. "I don't have any," he shouted. "I'll get it myself," she yelled back, already pushing the door open. "No, stay out." He tried to block her path. "Wilson, you useless man," she snapped, storming into the kitchen. "You've been living off your wife and that poor child for years. Now you're shouting over salt?" Arthur was shaking, with rage and shame. But when he returned to the bedroom after Mama Ruth left, Helena was alive, weak, barely breathing, but alive. His plan had failed, and now panic set in. Arthur Morgan stood frozen at the bedroom door, staring in shock. Helena was alive. She lay weakly on the bed, her eyes fluttering open, lips barely moving. She tried to speak, but only a faint sound came out. Arthur's heart pounded. She survived. But how much does she remember? He quickly shifted his expression to one of concern. "You're very sick, my dear," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "You need rest. I'll take care of everything." Helena blinked slowly, confused. Her body felt like stone. Her mind was cloudy, but somewhere in the back of her thoughts, something felt wrong. "You just stay inside, okay?" Arthur whispered, brushing her hair back. "Don't worry about anything." He left the room with a cold, hard face and turned his attention to Jonah, who sat in the corner quietly playing with his worn-out toy. The little boy looked up with wide, innocent eyes. Arthur bent down and pointed a trembling finger at him. "You little rat! Your time is coming." Jonah didn't understand the words, but he felt the hatred. He hugged his toy and began to cry softly. Arthur stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The house fell into a dreadful silence. Helena lay helpless. Jonah wept quietly in the corner. A home once filled with warmth now felt like a cage of shadows. Arthur walked fast through the dusty streets until he reached a small wooden shop where his old drinking buddy Tunde sat sipping cheap beer and playing cards. "Arthur," Tunde said, surprised. "What brings you here looking like death chased you?" Arthur sat heavily, eyes red with fury. "That powder you gave me didn't work." Tunde's eyes widened. "You mean the poison?" Arthur nodded. "She's still breathing. I need something stronger." Tunde backed away, alarmed. "You're mad. I won't be part of this. What you're doing is dangerous." Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "You owe me!" Tunde shook his head. "No, Arthur. That woman saved your life more times than you remember. And now you want to kill her? Over a child?" Arthur's face contorted with rage, but before he could respond, Tunde added in a quieter voice, "Besides, haven't you heard the news? The king is offering 50 million naira for the lost royal child." Arthur froze. Tunde continued, "They say the queen rejected a poor boy once, and now they're searching the kingdom for her abandoned grandchild." Arthur looked away and spat. "They rejected me too, you know. When we were younger, I wanted the queen. I begged her to choose me. But no, she wanted royalty, not a poor village fool." Tunde blinked in disbelief. "You and Queen Mariana?" Arthur's eyes burned. "Yes, and now it's my turn to hurt them. I'll make sure they never see that boy again." Tunde stepped back, worried. "Don't drag an innocent child into your bitterness." But Arthur had already made up his mind. He stood, face twisted with obsession. "I'll finish what I started." Arthur Morgan returned home just before sunset. His face was set like stone. His plan had crystallized in his mind, dark, final, and wicked. Inside, Helena was still weak, lying on the bed, struggling to stay conscious. She could barely move, but her mind was clearer now. She remembered just enough to feel afraid. Arthur walked in, his tone disturbingly calm. "You can hear me, can't you?" he said, pulling a chair beside the bed. "Good. Let me tell you something." He leaned close, his voice low and venomous. "Years ago, I loved Queen Mariana. I begged her to be mine, but she rejected me. Like trash. All because I wasn't royal. She wanted a prince." He stood up, his fists clenched. "Now I have her grandson, and I'm going to sell him. To strangers. Far away. She will never see him again." Helena's lips moved, but no words came out. "You thought you were smart," Arthur sneered. "But I poisoned your food. You should have stayed quiet." Then, without hesitation, he turned to Jonah, who sat in the corner, hugging his toy and watching his father with tear-filled eyes. "Come with me," Arthur ordered. "Where are we going?" Jonah asked softly. "Don't talk. Just follow," Arthur snapped, grabbing his tiny arm. "I want to stay with Mommy," Jonah whispered, looking back at the bedroom. Arthur's face turned red. "She's not your mother, and I'm not your father." You're nothing to me." Jonah began to cry, but Arthur didn't stop. He dragged the child down the dusty road, far from home. Eventually, they reached a quiet spot near the edge of the forest. 3 rough-looking men stood beside a rusty truck, waiting. "This is the boy," Arthur said coldly, pushing Jonah forward. One man tossed a dirty sack into the truck bed. "You sure?" Arthur nodded. "Take him." They handed Arthur a crumpled bundle of cash and 100,000. He counted it, smiling greedily. "I don't need the king's reward. This is enough for me. Let them suffer." Without another glance at Jonah, Arthur walked away into the night, pockets heavy, but heart darker than ever. In the truck, Jonah sat alone, whimpering softly. "Mommy?" But no one heard him. Back at the Morgan home, Helena stirred in bed. A whisper escaped her lips. "Jonah." Suddenly, far away at the palace, High Priest Malak awoke from deep meditation. His eyes flashed with urgency. "The child is in danger," he muttered, "but the heavens will intervene tonight." That night, as the 3 strangers drank themselves into sleep, something strange began to happen. Jonah, still too young to understand, stood up in his sleep, his feet moving without sound. The door creaked open on its own, and from the darkness, High Priest Malak appeared. "Come, child," he said gently. With sleepy eyes, Jonah walked barefoot into the night. The priest took his hand, and together they vanished into the bush, guided by fate, guarded by heaven. It was deep in the night, when the palace guards spotted a figure approaching the golden gates, a robed man holding the hand of a small boy. High Priest Malak stepped into the torchlight, his voice calm but powerful. "Open the gates," he commanded. "I have brought the child home." The guards rushed to open them without hesitation. Moments later, King Hadrian was roused from sleep. Still dressed in royal robes from his late-night prayers, he stood at the grand entrance of the palace, eyes wide. When he saw the child standing beside the priest, he gasped. The boy's face, the shape of his eyes, the small curl in his hair. It was like seeing Eliana as a baby all over again. "Is this?" the king asked, breathless. High Priest Malak bowed. "Yes, your majesty, your grandson, protected by divine hands." The king knelt, something no one had ever seen him do. He touched the boy's face gently, tears falling freely. "Welcome home, my prince." He ordered servants to prepare a warm bath, soft clothes, and a meal fit for royalty. The royal physician confirmed the boy was healthy, if a little tired. That same night, the king picked up his phone and called Eliana. "My daughter," he said urgently, "come to the palace at dawn. I have something to show you." When Eliana arrived the next morning, her heart pounding, she rushed into the royal hall. There, standing beside her father, was a small boy. Eliana stopped in her tracks, her body trembling. Slowly, she walked forward and knelt down before him. Gently, she took his hand and turned his wrist. There it was, a tiny, crescent-shaped birthmark. Her breath caught. "I remember this mark," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I saw it when I gave birth alone in the bush." Her knees buckled. She broke into tears. "This is my son, my Jonah." King Hadrian helped her up. "We believe you, but for the kingdom's sake, a DNA test must confirm it." 2 days later, the result came, in 100% match. Joy exploded through the palace like fireworks. The guards wept, the servants cheered. King Hadrian embraced Eliana and Jonah together. "From this day forward," he declared, "you are not a forgotten child. You are Prince Jonah Elin Hadrian, heir of this house." Meanwhile, far from the palace, Helena Morgan had fully recovered. She dressed with care and walked straight to the palace gates. "I must speak to the king," she said. "I raised that boy. I must tell him everything." The king welcomed her with warmth. Helena told the entire story, how she found the baby, how she loved him like her own, and how her husband tried to poison her. Then she handed over her phone, playing the secret recording of Arthur's confession. The king's face darkened with fury. That very day, Arthur Morgan was arrested at his usual bar. In court, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for attempted murder and human trafficking. Tunde, the man who gave him the poison, received 5 years for aiding in a criminal plan. As for Helena, the king knelt before her publicly and declared, "You saved my grandson. You protected him when even his own blood failed. For this, I reward you with a royal home and a lifetime pension." Helena wept with gratitude. The king also honored Mama Ruth, the nosy neighbor who had saved Helena's life. "Your boldness was a divine interruption," he said, awarding her generously. Peace returned to the kingdom. In time, Eliana and Dario were married in a majestic royal wedding, with Prince Jonah walking proudly by their side. The palace was once again filled with laughter, light, and love. And the boy once left to die in the forest, he became a symbol of redemption, a living reminder that from the ashes of shame, beauty, and purpose can rise.